All right, Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. It's a beautiful sunny morning, not a cloud in the sky. It's day 3 here on the Mojave Road recreational trail. If you've made it this far, you watched us really put our 2 Monteros to the test over the last couple days. Coming up the hill to Paiute Ridge and going down into the Watson Wash area, we really saw how much of a difference all the upgrades on the 94 SR make as I was balancing on 2 wheels a lot of the time in the 98. We're about 80 miles in, but really that's more than halfway because the speeds really pick up after this. We're into some pretty sandy stuff. It gets pretty deep at points. So it's gonna be a test of tires today, and there's a lot of washboardy stuff that's just gonna be boom, 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 boom. It's been an awesome trip. I would recommend maybe doing it in 4 days if you really want to take the time to do some hiking. We're doing 3 days because filming takes a while and we're stopping and checking stuff out. We camped at this incredible lava flow location, totally protected from the wind. We're all packed up, about to hit the road, but in the meantime, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It makes a huge difference for us. Thanks. Pulling out here on the 3rd morning, it's a little bit sort of mixed sand and grit. The truck seems to have some pretty good traction. It feels very similar to the Gladiator coming through here. But bringing up the Gladiator, this is our 3rd day on the Mojave Road. In the Gladiator, we did it in a day and a half. And it is starting to feel like we're moving just incrementally slower than we did in the Gladiator Rubicon. Maybe that's just a better suspension and chassis design. Maybe the longer wheelbase actually helps on stuff like the Mojave Road. Maybe it's also that I'm a little bit nervous because I really didn't know how these Monteros would do. I believe this is the Baker Road. In the distance you can see the 15 freeway as people are commuting back and forth to Las Vegas. This is another one of those outs where if something's going wrong, where if you're having trouble, you need to stop for more water, you can probably just drive to Baker in like 15-20 minutes, come back and rejoin here, or rejoin further along the way as well. Here we're crossing the road. I got my center differential locked to cross the road, very important. And we're back on the dirt, and we're just gonna wind our way around here. We're approaching what's called 17 Mile Point, which got its name because it's about 17 miles from Marl Springs and 17 miles from the next water stop if you're going east to west. So 34 miles in the hot desert on foot, that's a long traverse, and it's actually the longest section without water on the entire Mojave Road. So once you rounded 17 Mile Point, you knew you were doing all right with your water rationing. We're turning more due west here, and we're just gonna creep down this very washboardy, ruddy road, paralleling almost the 15 for a few miles until we get down into the lake, where it's really cool. It's really literally a salt lake. This section of the road coming down closer to the dry salt soda lake, whatever you want to call it, there are all these different crisscrossing paths through the desert, and it's kind of unclear which ones you should take. Right now, Dad's on the path over there, if you can see him, and I'm over here, and I think this is pretty smooth. All in, we're 90 miles in so far, and I'm still over half a tank. So the Montero's getting pretty good fuel economy. We're coming down into the flats after this long descent from 17 Mile Point. It's still pretty washboardy, but you can see the dry salt lake ahead. Apparently there's a way to sort of tell what's going on with it. If it's super white all the way across it, that means it's probably rained relatively recently, and it might be a little sticky in the middle. If it's brown, that means that it rained a while ago, it all evaporated, it formed a new layer of salt on top, and then since then the dust has blown in and covered that up a little, so it's probably a little bit of a safer bet to travel across it. The Soda Lake is fed by the Mojave River that starts up in Big Bear and winds its way pretty much north and then just ends here and dries up. So it doesn't flow all the time or even very much, but when it does, you want to be careful going out into the lake, which is what we're approaching now. You can see this is sort of salty, but mostly just brown. But after this little banked section, then we emerge out onto the sort of plain of itself. You can definitely tell this is not like the Bonneville Salt Flats. This is not a level lake. There's lots of little ditches, and if you were going really fast through here, you might get airborne, you might bottom out. The question always is, how fast would a Mitsubishi Pajero Evo take this? And the answer is always probably about 100 flat out. And it would be fine because it's got 24 inches of suspension travel, but I'm not trying to break my truck today. The traverse of Soda Lake is about 5.5, 6 miles. It's almost in a straight line, and it's hard to go astray. Right now we're pulling up to Traveler's Monument, which is a pile of rocks that people traditionally bring with them from their homes to deposit here. And there's also a top secret plaque at the top that only people who have done the Mojave Road are allowed to know what it says on there. So I can't tell you. We're just gonna head out of here, and I know that coming up soon are some big sand dunes and some little bit confusing directions. So hopefully all goes well. You can see all these cairns in here telling us where to go. That one's in the middle of the road. So I'm gonna go around here. We're gonna start hitting some serious sand soon. It's gonna be a good test of these skinny tires versus those wide tires. We're headed up to a pass, but then it's just a descent into the giant wash of the Mojave River as it comes out of Afton Canyon. And that's when the real sand begins. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a little nerve-wracking. There's a big campsite over here that I would imagine gets pretty crowded at the height of summer or spring break. And then we've got the view out into the Mojave River wash. Dad thinks he's gonna have to gear down, but I'm gonna keep it in 4 high with the center differential locked and not the rear differential locked. We'll see how that goes. Somebody has been kind enough to put wooden markers up instead of cairns, which might get washed away. This is a lot more sand than we saw in the Gladiator, and it's sort of blown across a lot more. It's making it a lot more slippery, but it's also a lot smoother, which is kind of nice. But you can still feel the washboards underneath, so that means that there is a little bit of grip going on at least. This is like a whole different deal than when we came through this in the Gladiator. The sand is much deeper. The Gladiator had no problem, but it's got those massive brand new tires on it. One question is, the Gladiator Mojave versus the Gladiator Rubicon. And we got some bigger bumps coming along. Woo! That was a little much. As we come up and the surface becomes more like gritty and grainy, you start being able to see where the destination of this whole wash is. There's a railroad bridge to the left of the mountain where you can see all the sand is coming from. And that railroad bridge is what we need to drive under. We're going to go under the bridge right here. I don't see any water under it. Last time there was some water. And we actually came up from further right, but it doesn't matter as long as you get under here. It was definitely sandier, but the Monteros seem to do just fine. Oh, there's a little bit of water. It's not completely dried up. Again, I think this is one of those areas where it doesn't really matter what path you take as long as you basically go along and try to get up into that canyon as best you can. Now we've come up the river enough that we're entering into Afton Canyon proper. It's a combination of watery, muddy, and sandy. Completely unlike last time we did this, which is kind of cool. It's like every time you do the Mojave Road, it's a new time doing the Mojave Road. Now we're gonna climb up onto the road next to the railroad, and it's gonna be all of these rocks that they used to build the grade for the railroad. Now we're really going to be right alongside the railroad, and if a train came by it would be pretty wild. And we're approaching the first serious water crossing. This one never gets mentioned in any of the YouTube videos, but it was the worst of the 2 big water crossings that we had to do in the Gladiator. So I'm going to be curious. It had rained a couple of days beforehand. Is there still going to be water up to the fenders here? No, it looks much lower, but we're going to stop and check it out. Well, I don't think this is going to be quite as dramatic as last time. We're going to try and give this a go here. It's not shallow. It's definitely deeper than I remembered. We're powering along. That was the deep section, and we're through it for the most part. Let's see how this part is. Oh, it's a little deep in there. All right. Well, let me go back and film Dad. Definitely deeper than expected, but both trucks are still running. Now it's up the hill, and we'll be along on the right, sort of north side for a little bit. This little section is once again alongside the railroad tracks. And the book stipulates do not stop here, probably because they don't want you to get blasted away by a train. That one, from my memory, was a little deeper than the next one we're going to do, which is the traditional historic starting point from the Afton Canyon Campground if you're going to do the Mojave Road from west to east. Here we're going to dip down. Ooh, some serious bumps out of nowhere. Away from the railroad track. The scuttlebutt online is that the railroad came in and filled in this crossing, but not the other one. Why you would do one and not the other, I don't know, but we're going to see how deep this one gets today. It's definitely rockier, like they put some of the grading rocks from the railroad into the water. It looks like we're about as deep as the tires are tall, but still nothing like it used to be. It used to be you needed a snorkel to get across this. We'll pull over and try and capture Dad doing this next. Both river crossings done, this is about where most people call it quits for the Mojave Road, or where they start. But we're going to keep going because there's like another 15-20 miles you can do, I believe, and we're going to be going on the unknown path because last time around in the Gladiator we stopped here. We didn't realize that you could do more and we were kind of out of time. This time we're going to keep going and try and do the full trail, the full Mojave Road recreational trail, and explore a little bit of unknown territory. It might be a little slower going because I'm going to be using the Mojave Road book while driving as opposed to having a navigator next to me, but it should be all right. This thing is usually pretty detailed. We're turning into the Afton Campground area here, where people come and stay. It's right off the freeway. It's just like a mile or two to the 15 from here. We're going to turn in, I believe, and follow more of the river. Afton Campground to the left, Mojave Road, four-wheel drive only, to the right. That's where we want to go. Small, narrow railroad bridge. There should be open route signs, but I don't see any. We're going to see where we go. This section is going to take us from Afton Canyon to Camp Cady, and that'll be like the official end. Then we'll get back on the highway and blast home at 80 miles an hour. We don't want to say that we left anything out this time around. This area is nice and sandy. Get a chance to really practice just flooring it to get through sand. Not what you're supposed to do. I guess it's just these tires or having the center drift locked, but every time I hit a little slow patch, if I just floor it, the truck starts giddy up and going. Now I can hear sand spraying around and hitting the underbelly. Doing all right in the deeper parts. Dad's truck looks like it's having a lot less trouble than mine. That might be a statement about the wide tires versus the narrow tires. Getting pretty sloppy in here. Slipping and sliding. Learning how to drive in sand. After getting through all that sand, you come up onto this power line service road that we're going to take for a little while and sort of follow this power line, which originates at the Hoover Dam, amazingly, and then turn down towards Camp Cady, and that's going to be the end of the road for us. Ahead are the ruins of old Camp Cady. We're at the end of the Mojave Road. We got to turn around and drive back up this super sandy hill and get back to that sort of improved road, and that'll take us to the highway. So one more test for the Monteros. Gonna put it in 4 high with the center differential locked, and second gear with the automatic. Hopefully get out of this little sand trap down here. Absolutely no problem at all. These Monteros are so awesome. We've learned a lot about them, and as we check our load and get ready to hit back onto the highway, I'll go over some of the stuff that this trip on the Mojave Road has really made me think of. Well, we're back on this, what looks like a main thoroughfare. We've reached the end of the trip here on the Mojave Road recreational trail. Come away super impressed with both Monteros. Mine had a little bit more trouble with some of the harder technical stuff than the 94 SR with the huge wheels and tires, the body lift, and all the transmission and suspension upgrades. One of the greatest parts about both of the trucks is the ride quality. It was a totally different experience than driving the Jeep Gladiator, which is brand new and about as bad as you can get from the factory. But these things, 227,000 miles, 170 or so, they'd ride amazingly well considering. Big thank you to Derek and to Tyler for taking such good care of them before us and for doing the little things to keep them running over the years. I like the upgrades I made, which were the big one, definitely the Old Man Emu rear springs. Without that, I don't know if I could have done this Mojave Road trip. A big question would be, going forward, if I wanted to do this again, should I remove my rear sway bar like Dad has on his truck? It probably would have given me a little bit more articulation coming down that Watson Wash descent. Even with the additional 15 miles or so after the Afton Canyon campground to make it all the way here to Camp Cady, my fuel gauge is still saying it's got just over a quarter tank, so that's pretty good. Didn't really need the custom gas can work. The Gladiator did the trip through Afton Canyon and used just over 1/2 of a tank, so the Monteros didn't do quite as well in terms of MPGs, but that's to be expected for such old trucks compared to something that is essentially brand new, has an 8-speed automatic transmission, and that we rarely ever even took out a 4 high. The Gladiator also leaves the factory with 33-inch tires. Dad's got those big, wide 35s, and I've got my narrow 31s. And I think we definitely discovered that in the sand, the wider tires are the way to go. For anyone who's thinking about doing this trip, I would recommend having a truck that's pretty well prepared if you want to go up Paiute Ridge on that rocky segment, and if you want to go down Watson Wash. The river crossing is also something to consider. You need to have maybe a snorkel. You need to have at least some protection from that water, which is shallower now than it used to be, but is still pretty deep. I don't think your average Subaru Crosstrek could handle that. But that water crossing is part of what's so great about the Mojave Road, just all the variable conditions. It's really an interesting way to test yourself, to test your vehicles, to get better at driving what you've got, and really have a good time while doing it. We took 3 days. We didn't really do that much exploring, and you're just gonna have to come see for yourself what's going on at Rock Springs and Camp Cady and Afton Canyon, because there's just no way to include it in a series of YouTube videos and to get everything right and do it all justice. For now, we're gonna head home. Time to manually unlock these hubs and free up the freewheel. But in the meantime, once again, and the last time for this video, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks for watching.